Doctor Who. The underrated stories. The Twin Dilemma. Perhaps the most obvious choice for one of these videos is their, apparently, most hated story ever, The Twin Dilemma. In almost every fan poll going for the last few decades, the closing story of season 21, Colin Baker's debut as the Sixth Doctor, comes dead last, officially making it the worst story ever, at least as far as fandom is concerned. But does it really deserve this title, or the venom with which it is treated? Well, actually, no. No, it doesn't. The Twin Dilemma's basic plot concerns a Time Lord, former friend of the Doctor, who is being forced to work for a giant slug with delusions of grandeur. Said slug forces him to kidnap two kids, the twins of the title, who happen to mathematical geniuses who the slug needs to help him work out calculations that will enable him to spread millions of giant slug eggs all over the universe. That is one seriously a pity slug. Of course, in many ways that's more the B-plot of the story. The main plot is really the Doctor's regeneration, which has gone tits up and left the new Doctor not physically ill, as is usually the case, but mentally addled. And this appears to be much of the source of the venom directed at the story. The most ire is particularly aimed at the scene where the addled Doctor tries to throttle Peary. Not only have I never quite understood the sheer level of unbridled hatred thrown at this scene over the years, but the consequences of it are even more bizarre. The whole point of the scene is to demonstrate just how seriously ill the Doctor must be to engage in such wildly out-of-character behavior. It's a dramatic scene, and meant to be. What's bizarre, however, is how a section of fandom apparently decided there and then that they hated Colin Baker's Doctor, and would never let him forget this moment. It's a deeply peculiar reaction, one that is not only inappropriate for the story but which does not say very much about these people's tolerance toward the mentally ill. Now does it? The Doctor is ill, but recovers, spends half the rest of the story trying to repent for that moment, and then fully recovers his wits by the end. Peary forgives him, because she knows he was not himself. Yet a certain section of fandom never will. What a bunch of asshats. To be honest, I think that Series 8 would have been much improved if Peter Capaldi's Doctor got his hands round Clara's throat every time she physically assaulted him for daring to do or say something Her Majesty didn't approve of. And she didn't have the excuse of being mentally ill. So, that scene aside, is there anything else in the Twin Dilemma that could possibly justify its placing as worst story ever? Nope. Yes, it's a bit cheap. But if that's a mortal offense, that's most of classic Who up shit creek without a paddle. Yes, it's a bit silly too, but if that were a mortal offense, that's most of New Who similarly screwed. For me, the biggest sin that Who can commit is to be boring, and the Twin Dilemma sure as hell isn't that. It's driven by a powerhouse performance from Colin Baker, who is absolutely fantastic and utterly hilarious throughout. Comedy highlights include his wonderfully fractious relationship with Hugo Lang, played by Kevin McNally, who he continues to insult even when he's stabilized by the end of the story and who really should have been kept on, and the scene where the Doctor hides behind Peary's skirts and screams, "Take her. Not me." When the bad guys show up. That scene never fails to make me piss myself laughing, and most of the rest of the story has a similar effect. The Twin Dilemma is really an absolute hoot. There is no way in hell that the Twin Dilemma is the worst story ever. The new series has at least a couple of dozen stories that are infinitely worse on every level imaginable, such as New Earth, Voyage of the Damned, In the Forest of the Night, Death in Heaven, and so forth. But even taking New Who out of the equation for a minute, is it at least the worst story of the classic series? Is it balls? It isn't even the worst post-regeneration story, with Time and the Rani taking that particular wooden spoon award, which also means it isn't even the worst story of the 80s. Is it, you ask, at least the worst story of the particular season it's in? No. No, it isn't. The Twin Dilemma is an infinitely more entertaining and fun story than the truly awful Warriors of the Deep and the tedious, plotless would-be macho mess that is Resurrection of the Daleks. So why does the Twin Dilemma cop so much flack? My own particular theory is that it is simply the sheep effect. It is widely acknowledged that much of fandom's opinions at one point were formed by Peter Haining's seminal 20th anniversary book A Celebration, which in many ways still sets the standard, at least for a lot of older fandom, as to what stories constitute classics and turkeys. This alone demonstrates the hive mind that is fandom, and the Twin Dilemma is yet another reflection of this. Fandom declared some years hence that the Twin Dilemma was the worst Doctor Who story ever made, and thus the hive mind, including newer fans who get all their knowledge from the likes of DWM and so forth, immediately go along with this fallacy. The painful reality that 10 years of New Who has provided at least a couple of dozen stories infinitely more deserving of the title apparently bothers nobody. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Twin Dilemma is a classic. It isn't. But nor is it the worst story ever, or even particularly bad. It is, in truth, actually a lot of fun and one of a group of stories I tend to reach for if I just want something to make me laugh and leave me with a smile on my face. Go in with an open mind, if you can, and it may just make you smile too.